What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right. Um, in this video, man, this is actually a response to a video Town Biz did last night. If you're not subscribed to Town Biz, please subscribe to Town Biz. All right. Town Biz was talking about James Harden, right? And of course, the Houston Rockets. Man, the Houston Rockets last night lost a game they had no business losing to, man. Like, y'all probably even see me in the community put up that little joke. It was a picture of a dude looking at his phone with like amusement, right? Joy, and it was supposed to be like James Harden, like looking at all the scoring records he's going to break playing against the Golden State Warriors. I mean, Christmas Day. Now, like Tom said, if there's a team that he in a format where he could put up big numbers, it should have been against the Golden State Warriors. All right, they're arguably the worst team in the NBA, or damn near one of the worst teams in the NBA, or the worst team in the NBA. And you know, if the Warriors had somehow kept it close for the first three quarters, I saw no reason why Harden couldn't at least drop 50. Honestly, the Christmas Day scoring record is 60, I believe, by Bernard King. He did it against the then New Jersey Nets when he was a member of the New York Knicks. I think it was Christmas '84 when he dropped 50. And 60, excuse me, not 50. So I thought Harden could flirt with that, but nope. The Warriors came out on fire. I mean, the Warriors came out with a purpose. They were like, we're not going to play on Christmas Day and get our ass whooped. And maybe some of it, you could look at the officiating giving, the Warriors a little bit of a heads up, with the C.J. Tucker and Draymond Green matchup a little bit. But no, you can't use that as an excuse, though. The Warriors should still have not beaten the Rockets last night, and especially as handily as they beat them. And James Harden last night, the Warriors made a concerted effort to contain him, and they did that. I think he only had like 24 points, and for James Harden, that's 15 points below his seasonal scoring average. They did rush to beat him, and bad Russ showed up last night. JP Ballin said something in the video that I agree with 100%. And he said that Russell Westbrook is like the only player in the NBA who, after the first couple of minutes of watching him in a game, you can see what type of game he's going to have. Is he going to be good Russ, which is the Russ that can be efficient, the Russ that might put up 27 points but might shoot 8 of 14, have a rare night where he's hitting threes, maybe 2 of 5, and getting to the foul line, actually. He's actually hitting his free throws this year, so people should give him credit on that. He's regained that touch from the foul line. Being efficient and economic with his shots, getting other people involved. Being a perfect complementary piece to James Harden out there, or is he going to be bad Russ? Turn the ball over, yakking up 30 shots, missing 20 of them, shooting threes and missing them horribly, and playing hero ball on steroids. And that's what we got yesterday with Russell Westbrook. Like I said, I love Russ, but I got to call a spade a spade. He played like shit, But this video is more about James Harden. There's some points that Town made that I think really hit home. He compared him to two other star players of different sports. The first comparison he made, he compared him to Dan Fouts of the NFL. The Dan Fouts was one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the San Diego Chargers, right? And he was a star quarterback back in the 70s and into the 80s. And in an era where defenses were still strong, he was consistently leading the NFL in passing yardage, And one year, I think he was the league MVP. I think it was like 82 or something like that, right? And he had a completion percentage of 59%, which I saw an article talking about Dan Fouts, but you got to keep it in context of the era. 59% completion percentage in the 80s was like 66% now. Like that was really high for his era because defenses were different. All right, defenses were more effective, honestly. All right, so Dan Fouts was putting up awesome offensive numbers, like throwing for over 4,000 yards, which is like throwing for almost 6,000 yards now. Like, I mean, just phenomenal numbers. But he could not lead his team to a Super Bowl or deep in the playoffs. He just came up short in so many of those situations. All right, that's what he was known for. He was a great regular season player, but in the playoffs, he just wasn't able to lead his team. He had great receivers around him. Now you can make the argument they didn't have a great running game, the Chargers, but still, Dan Marino, was able without having a great running game plus having great receivers, he was still able to at least get to a Super Bowl in his career. So, Dan Fouts was underwhelming when it came to playoffs. The best scenario, the best comparison he made though was Sammy Sosa. And I'm gonna tell you why though. And it's perfect. It's a perfect comparison. And I'm gonna tell you why. Sammy Sosa started off as a 4 or 5 tool player, right? He could, and I'll say 4 because he really never hit for average, but he could give you when he became a well-rounded player. He could get you 20 home runs. You know what I'm saying? He could steal bases. He was fast. He was he was above average fielder. Sammy Sosa before 1997 was a great all around player. Like I said, he might not hit for the highest average, but he was a decent. He could hit. He could give you like a 270, 280 batting average. He could get you 30 home runs. He could get you 100 RBI. You know what I'm saying? He could get you 30 stolen bases. He was a above average fielder. Like I said, I think he was a right fielder. But over time, Sammy Sosa became more and more infatuated with power and home runs. And the comparison that you make to James Harden is 4 years ago when he was still playing under Kevin McHale, I think that James Harden was better than this version of James Harden. James Harden then uh, could mix it up. He could score in the mid range. Yes, he had the 3-point shot, but he didn't just rely on that. He had the mid range shot, and at times he could go in the post and do something. You know what I'm saying? Uh, he doesn't do any of those things anymore now. Now it's just a step back three, and he really has 2 things or 3 things he does out there now. He doesn't have uh, the you know the depth of his offensive game that he had just 4 or 5 years ago, and he's become more and more concerned about points. And the thing about Sammy Sosa, as he put on more and more muscle, he went from being like a scrawny 170-pound guy to, at his heaviest, he's probably like 230, 235, maybe definitely 230, muscle bound. But he lost all of his speed, right? Lost a lot of his range of motion out there defensively. He became an adequate defensive player or fielder, I guess I should say, out there for the Cubs. He no longer could steal bases. And the most glaring statistic was he went from being a guy that hit like, I think, 36 home runs in 1997 to 66 home runs in 98, 50, I think 63 home runs in 99, 50 home runs in 2000, and in 2001 he hit the career high 64 home runs. Interestingly enough, every year he hit 60 home runs, he never led the league in home runs. It was either Mark McGwire or Barry Bonds. But the thing about it, that year that he hit 64 home runs, no stolen bases. That's how much he had focused on home runs and neglected other aspects of his game. And he did win an MVP award in '98, But in the playoffs, the Cubs under him failed. They either were knocked out in the first round for the most part, or they didn't qualify for the playoffs. And I think it was that one year they made the playoffs, but I think it was the Steve Bartman year where, a lot of Cubs fans blame him for losing, but it should have still never came to that. But for the most part, Sammy Sosa was a regular season behemoth, but during the playoffs, he underperformed. Now, you compare that to a guy like David Ortiz. Now, David Ortiz didn't hit as many career home runs as Sammy, but he did hit a lot. I think 541 or something like that. Usually he had that one year he hit 54 home runs, I think. But usually David Ortiz socked in between 35 to 40 home runs or something like that, right? Usually he didn't lead the league in home runs, but he was amongst the leaders. But you saw what type of player David Ortiz was during the playoffs, right? During the playoffs, David Ortiz was money. One of the great clutch performers in the history of Major League Baseball. Not just Red Sox, but Major League Baseball. There were so many games that I watched this dude when the Red Sox needed a hit or they needed a clutch, a run or whatever, a home run. David Ortiz delivered. I mean, it's like I never seen a guy in the last 15 years be more clutch in the playoffs on the offensive side of things than David Ortiz. And that's why, to me, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt about it. And that's remarkable for a guy that, if I remember correctly, started his career at the Minnesota Twins in like the late 90s. And I don't really remember a lot of hoopla about him. Back in the late 90s, it was all about guys like Mo Vaughn and, Greg Vaughn and, Vladimir Guerrero, who is a Hall of Famer. But I don't remember a lot of talk about David Ortiz. Matter of fact, when those two got together, it was Manny Ramirez who was seen as the better player. But now historically, I think Ortiz is at least the more decorated player and probably the better player. Although Manny did his thing too, to more Manny Ramirez. But yeah, at the end of the video, the end of this video, I'm just basically saying, like, I think James Harden is going to go down in history as like one of those guys who put up huge numbers in the regular season, and he will be a Hall of Famer. But he's one of these guys who never quite was able to lead his team to a championship. One guy that I know was really popular and was real popular in his heyday, but he also kind of reminds me of James Harden a little bit, just a little bit, is Pete Maravich. Now, Pete Maravich in college was a beast. He still holds the record for highest average. I think he averaged like 44 points a game in his collegiate career, which is still an all-time record. And I think they did the math where some expert who looked at all of the games and the shot attempts and calculated like what the three-point line is and all that. And he went back and looked at Pete Maravich's career and said, if the three-point line was instituted back then when he played, he would have averaged 57 points per game instead of 44 points. And the reason I bring it up is one year Pete Maravich, it all came together for him with the New Orleans Jazz. I think it was the 76-77 season. And Pete Maravich during that year averaged 31.1 points per game, including that explosion 68-point game that he had against the Knicks. You can probably look at it on YouTube. He shot 26 of 43 from the floor in that game. And a lot of those shots were outside shots. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how many of those 43 shots were beyond three-point range, but I'm willing to bet at least 10 of those buckets came from three-point range. So basically what I'm saying is Maravich probably, if there was a three-point line back then, instead of 31 points per game, it might have been more like 34. In today's era, maybe 35, because that's how often he shot from 20-something feet out. But that's also why his field goal percentage is only like 44%, which is about what James Harden shoots. And that 68-point game in today's NBA might be more like 78. Yeah, he was like Kobe in that game. You know what I'm saying? And he fouled out with 3 minutes to go. So if he hadn't fouled out, he would have scored over 70 points. So yeah, that literally was like a Kobe Bryant like performance he had. But the thing about it, Pete Maravich never really. To me, Pete Maravich was a great offensive player, great scorer, great passer, awesome ball handler, the best ball handler of his era. But I never got the impression from watching Pete Maravich that he a made players around him infinitely better. For the most part, I mean, don't get me wrong, his presence alone improved teams, but I don't think he really made guys that much better around him, and he just didn't really achieve much. No final appearances. I don't think he's ever been in a conference final. I think there were many seasons where his teams didn't even make the playoffs. So that's where I think James Harden's going to be. I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but ultimately, I think he's just going to be one of these guys that probably won't win a championship. At least not with him being the top guy. That's just my take on it, man. Tell me what you guys think.